The class that I have the most experience with large scale classes is a 200 level class. And it has started last fall. So I taught it on fall online, and it's available through the 7-week session and also the 15-week session. So the 7-week session is what I'm doing this semester, and it's going to be probably over 200 students. So I would love to just get a little take on, first of all, sort of the group here, and then maybe if you've taught online large classes or if you're thinking about developing it, if anyone wants to just share a little bit more, that may help with me tailoring some of my tips and hints.
I can share my experience. I teach in the graduate program for the supply chain department, our online master's degree. So I teach several courses in that program. I've developed the courses for that program as well. And we have small sections, right?
Mhm.
And so we try to manage how do we grow our sections, or how do we grow a section without adding multiple sections on there to keep it to scale. And so I'm here to learn how to, balance the learning objectives and group discussion and writing and that kind of stuff with grading, the grading workload when you increase the number of students. So I don't have any experience with large sections,
Right.
fortunately.
Yeah. 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 So I'd love to actually to get some ideas from some individuals in the workshop. So my online is like at the 200 level. In terms of master's level, where you have more in-depth critical thinking, writing, things of that nature. If anyone else has anything they want to share about that, hopefully some of my tips will definitely help for scaling in terms of grading, and just general course management. But yeah, the writing portion is the tricky portion to scale up.
I teach a service course, a 200 level service physics course for mostly life science majors. And it's just growing. It's asynchronous online, and it's just growing, and it has over 420 students this semester. So I think I can manage it quite well, but I'm always interested in seeing what other people do and maybe picking up some new techniques.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, that is very large. Excellent. I love that we can have the tools to reach a large audience across campus. So, and that, yeah, it's excellent. We live in a great time. So let me just jump in and kind of share with you a little bit about me. So you know that I've participated a lot in the Jumpstart program, which really helped develop this 200 level class. So this 200 level class is Retail Merchandising Management 200, and it's a fashion introduction to fashion class. And so we get students from all majors, not only retail majors, where I'm housed, but also across campus that are just sort of interested in this topic as maybe a side interest or an elective or a minor or things of that nature. So it's definitely growing every semester. Every semester there's getting a lot more traction to it. And it's online, asynchronous, and again in the 7-week. Does anyone teach in the 7-week class in this workshop? Marianne, it would be interesting if you had a 15-week class and a 7-week class, how that distribution would be. We're kind of playing around with that a little bit, although it might be very difficult to teach all of those modules within 7 weeks. But it's kind of a tool to reach sort of more students as well. That's what we're finding.
Our classes are classes with labs. So we're going to try it this summer because the summer semester is essentially a 7-week class. But I'm skeptical because there needs to be communication between the students and the students in the summer work. And there's just not enough time to really communicate efficiently. one student to another student, one student to the lab instructor or whatever. So we'll see how it works. It was already a challenge with the previous semester. I think it's going to be a real challenge.
That's a really good insight. Before we did 7 weeks of this class that I'm teaching, we did it over summer as sort of like a trial, and we did it a special topics class so that it wasn't actually the 200 level, just to really kind of practice what that might look like over 7 weeks. So I think, yeah, that's helpful because then less students take it as well. So it's able to manage the flow. Great. So we know this, right? There's a growing demand for online learning. And I mean, there's a number of statistics that I could have put on this slide about like the growth with online learning, that we need to be accessible. Also, I'm sure you're probably heard this too many times, but with the new budget model, teaching large classes we're a very small department. We only have less than 100 majors, but we reach an incredible amount of students through our online classes, and that really helps with sort of financial management of the department. So that's sort of our strategy, is to have large online classes while also having the strong mentorship that we have with a small number of majors. So it's a little bit of a balance, and from a pedagogy perspective, it's sort of a toss-up that we're constantly talking about in our department. Is we'd like to reach a lot of students to share with them about our major, because we find that we are housed in the Education, Health, and Human Sciences College, but we teach about retail business. So those that are interested in business are oftentimes in the business school. So we often get overlooked by students not finding us. And so it's one way to grow our reach, but also it's sort of that constant conversation of how do we have quality education to students with large online class management. So I'm sure that's a lot of why a lot of you are here today. So these are sort of the challenges that I've identified, and I'm sure there's some more that you can think of too with teaching these. So obviously maintaining quality, we're in higher education. That's our major goal, is to ensure that students have high quality education. They're learning the materials. The class that I'm teaching is a foundational level class. So really almost everything they're going to learn builds off of this class. So they really need to understand those core principles, those core concepts, in order to build from there in an effective way. But also too, it's you're reaching a lot of students, but you also want to keep them engaged. So I mentioned too that we're quite a small department, but we have these large classes. So in having student engagement is important to keep those majors, to attract those majors as a strategy. And the other thing, and if there's tips on this, I would love to hear your ideas, is because it's a 200 level class, there's a lot of students in it. It includes both our majors and non-majors. And I find that I have a tricky time reaching our major students. So knowing who they are, that sort of engagement piece. And so these tactics that I'm talking about are really trying to pull those students together, increase their engagement, and also really have that strong mentorship with majors so that I know who they are. I can identify them, and then I have them later on in class, and I already have a general idea of the things that they're interested in. So it's sort of managing that piece too, especially if it's split between majors and non-majors. And diverse learners. So having really that mix of educational materials for diverse learners. So not just reading materials, not just videos, not just quizzes, but a variety of different things. And I would say that's really where digital learning has really been a great opportunity for me to help manage the resources so that I can reach diverse learners. So just to give you a little bit of background and sort of how that class is structured, that I'm referring to. So it can be taught either 15 weeks or 7 weeks, and they move through several modules. So there's about 15 modules. So in the 7 weeks, it's really sort of doubled up, and they watch short videos that really cover the chapters. Now, there's a lot of information since it's a 200 level class. So a lot of concepts, a lot of theories, a lot of definitions, and it's really about an overview of the fashion industry. So I've had a lot of assistance with managing the videos and enhancing the PowerPoint presentation, and also enhancing sort of the assessments that go along with it. And the assessments are really there's a lot of multiple choice questions. There's also a lot of discussion-based questions so that they can have interaction with one another. And so because it is 200 level, that, that pedagogy practice really matches with the outcomes of that class. But also hopefully these strategies will help if you're teaching a higher level class, like a 300, 400, or even 500 level class. So in terms of course design and planning, I would say really starting from the beginning. So I was lucky enough that this class was actually totally developed to be an online class rather than a conversion from face-to-face to online. So I really had those objectives in mind when I was designing and planning and developing this class. And so starting from those learning objectives was really important. And that's, again, where I really utilizes the resources through digital learning to enhance sort of that connection. So really started with a curriculum designer, which then helped me develop what are these learning objectives, and then how do we scaffold from there to ensure that the medium at which students are receiving this information, that it really matches the course objectives, really module by module. So that was really helpful, because when I think about students interfacing with the class, I sort of automatically think like the video and sort of the assessment, but all of those are developed from those clear learning objectives. So really took a step back and really thought about that before scaling it up. So really clearly defined and measurable outcomes. So ensuring that they are measurable in order to match sort of what your course objectives are. So in terms of module design, so we want it to be flexible and scalable. And so I talked about sort of this idea of, the 15-week, the 7-week. I actually really want to explore it over like a mini term to see how that might work as well. So it was sort of designed to be sort of modular, in that you can either compress modules or expand them or shorten them, or make the assessment sort of cover 2 chapters instead of 1, and that kind of thing. So I kind of really went from there, which, knowing that this might be a large class, that it could be sort of modular in how we sort of move the modules around. So, and with that in mind, I tried to include a lot of content variety. So as I mentioned, the tips that I received when I was recording the videos were to ensure that the content was easily digestible. So rather than a 50-minute lecture where students may not be engaged that whole time, to really make them in short bits. And so again, looking at the objectives, I really match the videos with the objectives. So it could be like a 5, max 7 minutes. None of them are really around 7, 5 or 6 minutes, where I'm just really talking about one of the objectives over one of the chapters. So there could be 2 or 3 videos that then match with the course objectives. So breaking it down for students is very helpful. And then in terms of accessibility, there's lots of resources, both through digital learning and the Tennessee Teaching and Learning Center, to really go over the accessibility of the course. And so really looking at the course design on Canvas and the materials from the perspective of students with a variety of learning needs is going to be also very important. And from the beginning, to ensure that we're really looking at the quality of the education. So all of these are really sort of build on each other. And if you start from that, then everything else becomes easier rather than sort of going back and changing things. So keeping those in mind. So I'll head on to sort of engagement and interaction, which is again a conversation that we have probably amongst ourselves in terms of how do we keep students engaged? How do we keep interacting with them so that they feel a sense of community? I want students to know that they felt like they still had that experience of the classroom through interacting with others. And so by learning activities, again, because it's a 200 level class, are very quiz-based and discussion-based. And so the tools that I really find helpful for community building and also engagement with other students, I use Packback. I don't know if anyone else has used Packback in their classes. And so I mainly use this tool, which it can be integrated into Canvas to have students sort of interact with one another. And so for those that are unfamiliar with this tool, students go onto the platform and I have them ask a question related to the chapter, each module, so each chapter. And then also they have to respond to 2 other questions. So there's some interaction among students, but mostly what I also really want them to do is just begin to apply the material. So, very quiz-based, but also you bring that higher level thinking of applying what they've learned while also building a sense of community. Sort of that's the goal of that discussion. And I think it's important that students, when they sort of log on, that they have that sense that they're in the class and they're interacting with others, and they really have those practices as well as they're engaging. And so, and monitoring class interaction and attendance. So this is actually where I use, I'm lucky enough to have a graduate assistant for this class. And I mainly use them to continue to keep up with students' engagement, their interaction. So, there's tools within Canvas to see how many hours they've logged on, and, that summary report of how they're doing. And so what their work is as a TA, especially during that 7-week session where falling behind is really falling behind, is really engaging those students that may have missed something, and really flagging them quite early. So then she sends me a report. Usually, so things are usually due on Sunday. She sends me a report on Monday about sort of, is it continuing to be the same individuals? What's sort of the snapshot of the interaction and attendance that's happening for students? So that seems to be really important for getting students up to speed. Sometimes they don't realize, like, despite lots of communication about the class starting, that their schedules they might get confused about their schedule. So really just helping them jumpstart their interaction. Again, since it's usually the 7-week session is where that becomes more and more important, where we're moving through the materials really quickly. And then also I see quite value in this over summer classes or winter mini term classes or anything like that. So, or where materials build on each other. So a lot of times, right, our classes really build as you move through the semester. And so really just flagging those students early and interacting with them is really important. And this also helps with the personalization. So, ensuring that students are heard and communicated with. I would say most of my time in course management is individual emails from students. And so they might email me that they have a question about something, or maybe they see it differently than how the quiz was graded. And so what I do, obviously, I engage with that student, but I also then try to then send a course announcement with something quite similar, so that if others have similar types of questions, that they're also getting answers. So they may or may not feel comfortable to reach out, but at least they're sort of getting their questions answered. And then, as I mentioned, how I use my graduate assistant is sort of that interaction with students. Then that gives me a platform to reach out to those students too, and make sure that they're engaged. I wonder if they have any questions, or, let me help you get up to speed as well. So sort of staying on top of that interaction, even though there's a lot of students. Another thing that I would say too, for as on Packback, for those of you that haven't used it, it's although it's an external platform, it also gives me a lot of information for students that are also doing really well. So not only do I make sure that those maybe are falling behind can get up to speed, but those that are really excelling within that space, I'll actually get notification of in terms of a summary. So also on Mondays, I'll get a summary report of the questions and answers that they believe need to be highlighted. And so then I highlight those, I go in and I can see those students that are really excelling. And then I can highlight those, and then students then receive like a newsletter of those highlighted questions and those highlighted answers. So also really, having those shining stars be heard, but also at the same time getting those that might be falling behind. So hopefully we're sort of all moving in the same direction through those different strategies.
Michelle, I have a question for you. Have you used Packback for any kind of like writing assessment? I understand that it's a tool that can be used in that way to help you grade written work at the individual level. I'm just wondering if you've used it that way and how it works.
Great. That's a great question, Pam. So yeah, I'd say, so how it works is, as students, so students basically, they have to ask a question, based on the module, but also they, at the same time, AI is assessing their question to score a curiosity score. So that curiosity score is calculated, based on a number of metrics, but they can see it real time what their curiosity score is, whether they need to add more detail, whether they need to add a citation, whether they need to, expand upon an idea. And so they can kind of have that real-time assessment as they're writing it, and they have to meet a minimum curiosity score for full points. So most people do it, reach the full points, because they can also modify their question, in real time to reach that score. And so that's where I've used it, but it's only been really in like a paragraph 2, paragraph 3, versus like a essay or anything like that. So they do sort of have that tool available for longer form writing, but I mostly use it for that shorter form.
Okay, thanks.
But I would, I've, meeting several times a semester with their team. And I think that would be worthy of meeting with them and just really going over what your goals of that particular writing assignment may be, and checking to see if they have the tools to reach those needs.
Yeah, thanks.
I used to have a discussion board on Canvas for questions that I would then answer. But I found that maybe it's just the students I had, but I found it was actually more effective for them to contact me directly, and then I send out another announcement, because I actually wanted more students to answer their other questions, to make it a little bit more efficient. But that tool wasn't really used for the student body. They weren't really interacting in that way. So I've tried a number of different things to try to create some interaction. But I do find using that external tool, and I'm sure there's others, to be quite helpful. Great. So some of this is a bit of an overlap, but I think there's a lot of tools that we can use in order to enhance the scalability of classes. So particularly if you're going from face to online and it's becoming much more high attendance, I would really encourage you to lean into those technology tools and resources to really help manage the large classes. And so, there are like discussion platforms, like I mentioned. And so there's also a number of other tools that can be utilized. I just really find that I can use Canvas really effectively and Packback to meet my course objectives and my learning outcomes. But also I really encourage you to explore what other tools might be if your learning outcomes really scale beyond that. So in terms of communication, so usually what I do is, assignments are always due at the same time in the same week. So students can really get on that flow of schedule. They're usually due Sunday at midnight. I've kept that time, but also find that if there's any issues, there's a lot of issues that happen over the weekend. So you may want to think about, like a Friday noon or something like that, depending on sort of when you're able to manage any of those things. But over time, I've really fine-tuned it so there really isn't any of those issues. But as you're beginning to develop maybe those flow of the class, maybe consider that too. So in terms of scalable communication, so things are pretty regimented in order to enhance sort of making sure that students know what is happening and when it's happening. So as I mentioned, that same due date, Sunday at midnight, but then on Monday, I might do, this is what this week looks like. And that's where sort of we highlight the what's happening on Packback. They also get that newsletter. So on Mondays, I really go, okay, this is what we're going over this week. Remember, we've got XYZ kind of thing. So really kind of having that regimented scalable communication is really important. And I utilize announcements on Canvas for that communication. And then also highly monitoring progress. So I already mentioned some other tools that I use, but using any sort of maybe schedule to help you with that management is going to be really helpful as well.
Can I share one, Michelle? Or I just
Please.
make a comment on what you said?
Yeah.
I thank you. You're doing such a great job. I have struggled as well with the time due date thing because every student assumes it's 11:59, either generally Friday or Sunday, right?
Yeah.
And I have tried to move the needle and make mine at 5 p.m. on a Wednesday. The reason I do that, or weekday, is because I have 12 GTAs that work with me plus me. And if there's issues, I tell them I do that so that if you have, mine's more, it could be technical issues than what you're talking about, because I work in another platform also. So it's like, this is for you. I'm trying to do this for you, because if you have issues, I'm not going to be at my computer at 11:58 on a Sunday or Friday, right? And so, and also your Sunday night, this helps too, but if it's Friday, if you Saturday, Sunday, you got to wait till Monday. Sunday night helps because you have Monday morning, but still Mondays are crazy anyway. So I do it midweek, 5 o'clock, and I always get a few students who grumble about it, but I also, being an asynchronous class, they have all the work from the beginning and outset. So there's not an excuse that they waited till the last minute. But anyway, I just wanted to comment. I applaud your effort to try to do something a little, just to acknowledge why you're doing it on a certain day and night. Because sometimes if everybody else does it this way, it's just hard to kind of change the system of people's thinking.
Yeah, Lee, and I really appreciate you saying that, because I've toyed with that. I was like, maybe I should make it on, whatever date where I can monitor. So I definitely like work Monday to Friday. And so if I feel like Sunday night wouldn't work, I mean, there was only one time where there was a technical issue with Packback and I had like my email just blew up from like 11:30 to midnight on Sunday. And then I just addressed it on Monday. There was a technical issue. Anyone that had that will, so it was just a little bit of legwork that Monday morning, but um so I think making it clear, and also I feel like they'll only make that mistake once. If you make it on Wednesday at 5 o'clock, they miss it the first time, then then at least they have the rest of the semester to really make that up. So but if it's always at Wednesday at 5, then they'll get used to that. So
I do, if I can do one more thing, I do like a practice due date, the very beginning.
yeah, that's a
And
good
so
idea.
it's like a light, of 600 points, it's like 10 points. And it's like to
Yeah,
get them used to it. And, with lots of students, there's always people that miss that. But yeah, I'm glad I have like 200 emails every
yeah.
due date, and just because it's, for lots of different reasons, but technical issues mainly. But anyway, it sounds like you're very controlled and that's awesome. So
Yeah, thank you. And actually that's a really good point. I'm glad you mentioned that. The first back assignment, I just usually give full points, but I want them to try to do it. So some are very familiar with the platform, some are not. And so I'll get a notification if someone has missed it or not missed it. And then I kind of reach out to them individually and I'm like, how do you need help getting onto this platform? This is what we're doing. I kind of remind them about it, but that first week, I would say like maybe 80% of the students get in. There might be 20% that still just need that extra, how can I help you? And then they get it. But I wouldn't, that's a really good idea, actually. I've over time realized that first week needs to just be either like a practice, kind of a low stakes kind of assignment. So in terms of assessments, I'll use the quizzes within Canvas. So those are automatically graded. And I do go back in, I actually look at 2 metrics. Again, on Monday is, what was like the scores of each student. So I just kind of click through to get an idea. And I also really want to see like, how long did they take to do it? So actually, I don't have any time limit on the quizzes for a number of reasons. But they usually do it within like the time frame that I sort of would anticipate. Okay, so I use quizzes with on Canvas for assessment. And so I look back and I go, what was sort of the average score and how long did they take to do it? And that just helps me understand the digestible information. I mean, usually if they take the time, there's 10 questions, usually they take 10 to 15 minutes. It's usually generally a higher score, and less time, sort of less score. But I also just sort of want to see the time that they're interacting with the quiz and with the module. So I kind of look at that, and if it's like 1 minute, I kind of like, oh, let's reach out to that student and see sort of what's happening with them. So I sort of look at those 2 metrics. And I also find, and I have like higher level of communication with students, that they're much more engaged. And so frequent feedback. So like on Monday, I might go through everything and really just like highlight what I want to say to students and then provide like a summary interaction with them on the Canvas announcement as well. So also find too, in the large classes, that if it's clear sort of what the rubric is for anything, what I'm looking for, that also decreases the amount of individual communication that I have back with students. So really thinking about that from the beginning is going to be really helpful. So I just have, I think, 1 or 2 more slides left, actually 1 more slide, and I want to talk about support. I really, really, really couldn't have done it to this high quality level without the support from digital learning. So I really, I really am a big fan of digital learning, which is why I'm like, yes, to all these opportunities. I'm happy to give back when I've received so much. So they've been really helpful for making it an attractive course, making it exciting, helping me think through all of these things as well. And I also am lucky enough to have TA support. So even if it's like if you're teaching a 100, 200 level class and it's maybe an undergrad student that has already taken the class, that might be helpful if there isn't a graduate program in it. And also thinking about scaling this class beyond myself. So if I'm on leave or we need to teach another section, having that TA, with me for at least a semester, and then training them on the course management for them to take it over. Sort of that long-term planning is also really important. So that is something to think about if you want to scale it beyond yourself, and really having sort of that step-by-step mentoring process for graduate students or other faculty members as well. Another thing we sort of played with is, okay, so if I'm the one that's in the recordings, I mean, Lee, you would probably be the expert on this. You're the one in the recording and someone else is having that sort of course management. How do we like interact with students so that they know who their instructor is? That's something that we talk a lot about, is like my modules for this class, right? Eventually someone else might teach it in order to scale it up, but it's me that's sort of in the lecture. So that's, I don't know, just a toss up that maybe if someone has a good solution for. And and definitely tracking those students from the beginning. And I have that support system there through the TA for tracking student progress too. So those are sort of my tips and hints. And I would really love if anyone else had ideas that maybe that I'm missing. But again, my context is really sort of that 200 level type of class where we're trying to reach quite a lot of students across the university.